beneath the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, far below the gilded ceilings and sunlit frescoes, there lies a chamber rarely spoken of and even more rarely entered. Not a crypt, not a library, but something quieter, older, a chamber of whispers. It is here, under the eternal city, that history sometimes halts its march, where silence speaks louder than ceremony, where the walls remember what men forget. The man sitting in the chamber tonight wears no crown. His robe is black, plain but precise, the cut sharp as discipline. He is old, his back slightly bowed, not by age alone, but by the weight of knowing. In his hand, a quill. Before him, a single sheet of cream-colored paper, smooth as unspoken sign. His name is Adolfo Nicholas. But the world, at least those few who dare to speak of such things, knows him by another title, the Black Pope. Not a title of darkness, but of shadow, of secrecy, not sin. He is the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And though his name is unknown to most, his influence stretches through cathedrals, classrooms, and continents. Where the white Pope, seated above, commands the light, the Black Pope moves through twilight, directing, discerning, remembering. But tonight his pen does not record nor instruct. It releases outside. Rome sighs with the sounds of evening, the quiet hum of prayers, the echo of cobblestones. But inside this stone vault the only sound is the steady scratch of quill to parchment. He writes slowly, deliberately, as if each word might echo for a century. Perhaps it will. The letter, or perhaps it is an order or a confession, is brief. It is not addressed. It bears no salutation, only intention, finality. It speaks in a voice only a handful in the world could understand, a language not just of Latin, but of layered code, Jesuit phrases, a rhythm known only to those initiated through decades of sacred obedience. He pauses only once, midway through the second paragraph, not to correct, but to consider. Then he writes again. At last he sets down the pen. He does not fold the paper. He lets it lie open, like a wound. Beside him rests a thin ribbon of red wax. He lights the candle, the flame flutters, and seals the bottom of the page with the Jesuit emblem, IHS, the Christogram that has marked Jesuit documents for nearly 5 centuries. Above it 3 small letters no larger than a breath. IOV, the wax cools, the deed is done. There is no ceremony, no audience, no priest or page. And yet something immense has just passed through this world. A door has closed. Another, one we cannot yet see, may have opened. Let us pause here. Dear listener, before we dive deeper into history and its hidden corridors, let us settle beside this moment, the moment of unknowing, for the death of a secret is not an ending. It is a beginning, and the man in black has just buried something without digging. A grave. Adolfo Nicholas would die just weeks later, quietly, far from the public eye. No scandal, no spectacle. Only peace, or so we were told. His successor would speak of him with reverence, a humble man, a scholar of Asia, a servant of the Lord, but none would speak of the final letter. None would speak of the chamber beneath. The domed dot, because the chamber is not in any guidebook. Its location is not catalogued. Only whispers remain, and the Vatican is a city built on whispers. The Jesuits have always understood the power of silence. Their founder, Ignatius of Loyola, once said that Love ought to be shown more in deeds than in words. In the society, silence is not absence. It is a language of its own, and this silence, the one sealed with red wax and veiled intentions, may be the most eloquent of all. Tonight, as we drift into this story, let us do so gently. Let us not pry the door open, but listen through the keyhole. Let us walk with care through the long halls of history, where faith and fear often wear the same robes, and in doing so we might come to understand that the greatest mysteries are not hidden by darkness, but by devotion. So sleep, if you wish, with that thought in your heart. Some truths are not meant to be uncovered, only remembered, like a prayer spoken beneath breath and lost beneath the dome. Long before Adolfo Nicholas dipped his quill into that final inkwell, another man knelt before a pope, not to receive glory, but permission. His name was Ignatius of Loyola, a soldier once broken in body, yet refined in spirit. He had wandered through pain and prayer, through courts and caves, until the world grew quiet enough for him to hear his calling. He did not want a throne. He did not even want a pulpit. He wanted only to serve, but with clarity, with discipline, and with purpose sharpened like a sword. In 1540, he stood before Pope Paul III and offered him not an army, but something. Stranger, men who would serve without hesitation. Men trained not just in Scripture, but in science. Not just in prayer, but in politics. Men who would go where the Church could not, and do what the Church must. Thus, the Society of Jesus was born, but behind this sacred name loomed something more, a movement of minds and missions, bound by obedience so absolute it bordered on the mystical. Unlike the sprawling monastic orders of old, the Jesuits were agile, lean, and precise. They took no vows of isolation. Instead, they entered the world like divine diplomats. They taught the children of emperors. They explored the jungles of Brazil, the coastlines of India, the imperial courts of China. They advised queens and converted kings, slipping into corridors where politics and faith collided. And yet, through all of it, they remained largely unseen. Not because they hid, but because they became part of the fabric. Theirs was not the power of spectacle. It was the power of structure. At the center of this intricate web stood a man, called the Superior General, elected but not truly known. He answered directly to the Pope, in theory, but in practice his reach was vast, his knowledge intimate. With thousands of Jesuits scattered across continents, reporting in secretive coded letters, the general possessed a perspective few on earth could match. He was called the Black Pope not in insult, but in recognition. He wore black, yes, the traditional Jesuit garb, simple and austere, but also because his role was parallel to the white popes, hidden in function yet fundamental in form. In Rome, it was whispered, the Pope rules the visible church. The Black Pope rules everything else. Let us pause here, not to dramatize, but to understand. What does it mean to wield invisible power? The Jesuit crown is not gold. It is made of silence. It is the silence of the confessional, where emperors and generals admit their secrets. It is the silence of correspondence, where knowledge is shared without spectacle. It is the silence of obedience, that most curious and terrifying vow. Jesuits do not rise through charisma alone. They are shaped, tested, broken, and built again. Their hierarchy is like the root system of a vast tree, unseen yet deep, strong, enduring. The general sits at the base of it all, and yet he is not above his brethren, at least not in spirit. He lives in the same sparse quarters, eats the same bread, sleeps behind unmarked doors. Power for the Jesuits is a means to serve, and yet it is still power. Over the centuries, this delicate balance between service and sovereignty has been tested. In the 18th century, the Jesuits grew so influential that monarchs across Europe began to fear them. Portugal expelled them. France denounced them. Spain demanded their dissolution. And in 1773, under pressure from these powers, Pope Clement XIV did the unthinkable. He disbanded the Society of Jesus. The Black Pope of that time, Lorenzo Ricci, was imprisoned. He died in confinement, and with him, so it seemed, the Jesuit order. But silence endures. 41 years later, in 1814, the Jesuits were quietly restored. No spectacle, no parade, just a return to what they had always done, waiting, watching, teaching, listening. And from the ashes the crown of silence was reclaimed. In modern times, the Jesuits have grown less secretive, at least on the surface. They run universities, publish books, engage with science, social justice, and philosophy. They are progressive by tradition, paradoxical by design. The first Jesuit Pope, Francis, now sits on the chair of St. Peter, a fact that some call prophecy, others irony. But even now, the Superior General remains cloaked in mystery. Elected for life, obeyed without question. He lives near the Vatican, but in his own world, where files are read in solitude, letters burned in fireplaces, and decisions made without applause. The current general, Arturo Sosa, once described the order's task as a kind of interior pilgrimage, one that requires listening to the murmur of God in history. And what of Nicholas, his predecessor? He too listened, and when he could no longer hear the divine murmur, he wrote one final time and sealed the silence forever. So sleep now with this thought, that while popes reign in marble halls, others guide from shadows, that not all crowns glitter, and that perhaps the truest power is not in being seen, but in being remembered only when the time is right, beneath the sunlit grandeur of the Vatican, beneath the bustling piazza, where pilgrims gather and tourists marvel, lies a vast labyrinth unlike any other. Not of stone corridors alone, but of time, memory, and silence. This is the realm of the Vatican's secret archives. The name itself invites mystery. Secret archives. But in truth, these halls are less about hiding than about preserving. A vault of human history's most sacred and sensitive moments, spanning centuries, guarded not by locks alone, but by oaths whispered in shadows. To enter this labyrinth is to step through a threshold where time bends. Scrolls yellowed with age, letters penned in trembling hands, documents folded and sealed with the weight of nations, all sleep here, in endless rows. Here, the history of the Church, and indeed the world, is written not only in Scripture, but in politics, war, and whispered alliances. Among these tomes lies a layer seldom spoken of, the orders, decrees, and commands that shaped the invisible spine of the Church's power. The Jesuit Superior General, the Black Pope, was both a steward and a conspirator of these secrets. His final orders, penned in quiet solitude, were stored somewhere in this sacred vault, a command so sensitive it was meant never to meet daylight. This chamber of secrets is not open to tourists, nor to most scholars. Only a handful of Vatican officials themselves, sworn to lifelong silence, may enter. Imagine the corridors, walls lined with thick wooden shelves, the scent of leather and dust thick in the air. Lanterns flicker softly, casting long shadows. The silence is profound, broken only by the soft rustling of parchment, or the faint echo of a cautious footstep. Each document is a thread in a tapestry too complex for casual glance. Some tell of peace treaties between warring kingdoms. Others reveal excommunications whispered in despair. And hidden among them, possibly, lies the final instruction of a man who understood the weight of history, Adolfo Nicholas. What could these final orders contain? A revelation to reshape the Church? A warning to protect a fragile peace? Or perhaps a secret so profound it must be protected, even from those it would save? Over centuries, the archives have endured attempts to breach their walls. In the 19th century, Napoleon's armies tried to seize what was theirs by conquest, only to find themselves outmaneuvered by cryptic codes and the steadfast loyalty of the Church's guardians. More recently, scholars and journalists have yearned to peek behind the curtain, only to be met with polite refusals and impenetrable locks. For in this labyrinth, knowledge is not free. It is earned, carefully guarded, and sometimes deliberately withheld. But history is not static. A whisper escaped recently, a letter smuggled, a name revealed, a secret shared with a select few. And with that the labyrinth trembled. A single thread, pulled from its careful place, threatens to unravel decades of silence. What does it mean when the Black Pope's final command sees the light of day? How does the Vatican respond when the quietest order in its history becomes a question that cannot be silenced? And so, as we trace this story, we walk the corridors alongside those who guard the past and those who seek to understand it. With each step, the walls seem to lean closer, the shadows deepen, and the weight of centuries presses gently upon us. Rest now, gentle listener. Let your breath slow as the gates of the Vatican's labyrinth close softly behind you. Here, in the hushed embrace of stone and spirit, some secrets sleep, waiting for the dawn. The Vatican is a city of layers. Marble and gold gleam in sunlight. But beneath the glint lies a world woven with shadows. Within these ancient walls, where faith and politics intersect, power rarely shouts. It whispers. The College of Cardinals, resplendent in red robes, moves with the grace of actors on a timeless stage. Their gestures are deliberate, their voices soft but resolute. Every word spoken here is chosen with care, every silence charged with meaning. These men hold the keys to the Church's future, choosing popes, guiding doctrine, navigating crises both spiritual and temporal. Yet even among them few understand the true breadth of influence wielded by the Jesuit Superior General, the Black Pope. To the public, the Pope is the face of Catholicism, the shepherd of 1 billion souls. But behind the scenes, the Black Pope guides unseen currents, steering the course with subtlety rather than force. This influence is not authoritarian. It is more akin to the gentle touch of a conductor guiding an orchestra. The Jesuits' power flows through counsel, through mentorship, through quiet negotiation, the Superior General advises popes and princes alike, though his voice often remains unrecorded in history's pages. His strength lies in discretion. His authority in unwavering loyalty to faith and order. The Black Pope's final orders, whatever they may have been, would have navigated this labyrinth of relationships. They would have reached cardinals in Rome, bishops across continents, Jesuit missions hidden in far-flung corners of the world. Throughout history, the Jesuits have been advisors to kings and confessors to emperors. Their reputation for intellect and diplomacy precedes them. This reputation shapes their role within the Vatican, trusted counselors rather than mere functionaries. Yet, this trust can breed suspicion. The Black Pope's power has often been misunderstood or feared, casting long shadows that feed legends of conspiracy. But beneath these rumors lies a deeper truth. The Jesuit order's influence is a tapestry woven from service, sacrifice, and strategic patience. The Black Pope's role is a paradox, a servant-wielding sovereign sway. As we consider the final orders of Adolfo Nicholas, we must imagine them as part of this delicate dance, instructions meant to preserve, protect, perhaps even transform, orders that might have reached ears far beyond Rome, carried in sealed letters, and spoken in hushed tones. What weight do such words carry when delivered into a world balanced between tradition and change, between faith and the shifting tides of modernity? In this quiet power there is also a profound loneliness. The Black Pope's counsel is often given without applause, his victories unseen. Yet it is in this solitude that true influence is forged, not in the glare of public acclaim, but in the steady forging of history's hidden paths. Now, as you close your eyes and drift gently toward rest, imagine these whispers echoing softly in the grand halls of power. Hear the measured steps, the quiet exchanges, the delicate weaving of destiny beneath the surface. And know that in the world's greatest mysteries, sometimes the most profound, truths are those spoken in silence. In the dim light of a secluded chamber. The final act of a hidden authority is not a shout, but a whisper, a gentle press of crimson wax onto parchment. This small, deliberate gesture carries the weight of centuries, binding more than words. The seal on a letter from the Black Pope is no mere decoration. It is a sacred lock, a veil drawn tight between the secret inside and the outside world. Pressed with the emblem of the Society of Jesus, the IHS Christogram, and marked with a cryptic set of initials, it guards a truth meant to remain hidden until the appointed time. Wax has been used for centuries to protect the integrity of correspondence. But here it serves a dual purpose, to safeguard and to sanctify. It transforms a document into a covenant, a silent vow of obedience and discretion. The act of sealing is an intimate ritual. The flame flickers, the wax softens, and the impression of the emblem is pressed deeply, a physical embodiment of spiritual authority. The final letter of the Superior General becomes a relic charged with intention and mystery. This seal is not just a boundary, it is a promise. To the recipient, it signals trust and responsibility, a sacred burden to guard what lies within, to the world beyond. It marks the line between revelation and concealment. It whispers that some truths are too fragile for light, too profound for casual glance. The letters may fade, The wax may harden and crack with time, but the silence they enforce echoes through generations. History is punctuated by such seals, moments when power chooses to speak softly, binding itself to faith and fate. Kings, popes, and generals have all used wax to protect secrets that could shift empires or preserve peace. For the Jesuits, whose order thrives on obedience and discipline, the seal is a symbol of their very essence. It embodies the orders: vow to serve, to obey, and above all to protect. In pressing wax onto paper, the Black Pope was not merely finishing a letter. He was issuing a final command, a closing of a chapter, and a story woven with faith, politics, and human complexity. What might lie beyond the seal? What truths? What warnings? What blessings? We may never know, but as we imagine the slow cooling of the wax, the quiet chamber that holds this letter, we are invited into the sacred mystery of restraint. As you lay your head to rest, think of this seal, a silent guardian of secrets, a gentle custodian of history's weight. Some doors close not with force, but with grace. Some endings are not ends, but invitations to sleep deeper into the unknown. In the vast and hushed corridors of Jesuit power, the decision of a superior general to resign is no ordinary event. It is a rare and solemn gesture, filled with meaning and gravity that echoes beyond the moment. Adolfo Nicholas, the Black Pope who held the order's reins with calm authority, chose to step down in 2016, though the act seemed simple. A man handing over his role, it was anything but. To resign is to release a burden accumulated through years of whispered counsel, quiet strategy, and steadfast leadership. It is an act of humility, surrendering authority without fanfare. Yet this was not a retreat into silence. It was an intentional act of transformation, a deliberate closing of one chapter to allow the next to begin. This resignation was unlike the papal abdication of Benedict XVI, which captivated the world with its rarity and spectacle. Nicholas's decision moved through less visible channels, a ripple felt only by those attuned to the subtle pulses of the Church's inner life. His farewell was wrapped in the same cloak of discretion that had marked his tenure. There were no grand announcements, no public declarations. Instead, there was a quiet letter sealed, perhaps, with that same sacred wax, and a simple request for obedience to the next leader. In this silence lay a profound message. Leadership is temporary, power is transient, and true service knows when to yield. Within the society of Jesus, obedience is not submission to power, but submission to mission. Nicholas's resignation was an expression of that mission's demands. He understood that the order's vitality depends on renewal, on passing the torch so the flame may burn brighter. It was also a moment of vulnerability, revealing that even those who seem strongest must listen to the call to rest. The world outside scarcely noticed. The Church's grand stage dazzled with other dramas, but within the Vatican's shadows, this quiet act reverberated like a deep breath, a resetting of the compass for a body both ancient and ever new. As you drift towards sleep, imagine this moment: a man standing in a shadowed room, setting down the weight of decades. No crowds, no applause, only the gentle closing of a door, the whisper of footsteps fading into night. In that silence there is peace, and the promise of tomorrow. In the splendor of St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope stands as a beacon of faith, a visible symbol of the Catholic Church's enduring presence. He is the shepherd, the vicar of Christ, the spiritual leader of millions. But in the corridors just beyond the gaze of the faithful, there exists another figure, the superior general of the Society of Jesus, often called the Black Pope. His role is not to shine in the spotlight, but to steady it, not to command from a throne, but to guide from a quiet place behind it. The relationship between these two men is complex, woven from threads of respect, tradition, and shared purpose. They represent two poles of a single institution: the white Pope, the visible face of the Church's spiritual authority, and the black Pope, the guardian of its intellectual and missionary heartbeat. Throughout history, this balance has shifted. At times, the Jesuits have been advisors and confidants, their influence subtle yet far-reaching at other moments. Their power has provoked suspicion and conflict, fueling whispers of secret councils and covert agendas. But beneath the rumors lies a more profound reality, a partnership grounded in mutual recognition of distinct roles. The white Pope embodies the Church's visible authority, presiding over liturgies and councils, inspiring millions with words and deeds. The Black Pope, by contrast, is a steward of mission and discipline, ensuring that the Church's message reaches every corner of the world with rigor and integrity. This duality, visible and invisible, spiritual and strategic, forms the backbone of the Church's resilience. Adolfo Nicolas understood this dynamic intimately. He navigated the delicate dance of influence with a patience born of deep faith and experience. His final orders, then, were not commands issued from a throne, but thoughtful guidance meant to preserve this balanced to hold power lightly, to serve humbly, and to trust in the unfolding of a mission greater than any individual. As night deepens, imagine these two figures, one in white, one in black, their paths intertwined yet distinct. Each holds a part of the whole, each moves to a rhythm both ancient and alive. Together they shape a legacy whispered in shadow, and sung in light. Rest now, with the quiet understanding that true power often lives in the spaces between, in the gentle hand that steadies the crown, and in the unseen presence that guards the flame. Few places in the world are more misinterpreted than the Vatican's secret archives. To some, the very name Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum stirs images of cloaked figures and locked vaults, of ancient scrolls bound in chains, of conspiracies inked in Latin beneath flickering candlelight. But secretum does not mean secret in the modern sense. It means private. These are the Pope's private archives, documents reserved, preserved, protected. Still, names carry power. And in this case, perhaps a hint of truth lingers beneath the correction, because secrecy, after all, is not only about hiding. It is about timing. The archives span over 50 miles of shelving room after room of bound ledgers, papal bulls, royal correspondences, theological debates, trial transcripts, maps, and letters that shaped the known world. It is here, in the hushed sanctum of recorded memory, that the weight of Catholic history quietly resides. Here, Galileo's trial record sleeps beside letters from kings who once trembled before the Pope's seal. Here lie the suppressed documents of the Reformation, and notes from conclaves that shaped continents. Here, perhaps, lies something more recent, and infinitely more fragile, the final orders of the Black Pope, a letter sealed in red wax, encoded, in the shorthand of a dying era, a message from Adolfo Nicholas, written not for glory, but for guidance. It would not be filed openly. It would be hidden perhaps within a sealed collection, marked only with initials known to a select few. A letter not for this generation, but for one yet to come. Jesuits are not careless with their legacies. They are meticulous. They do not waste ink, nor intention. The archivum secretum would be a natural resting place for such a message beyond access, yet not beyond reach. Few are allowed into the archives. Even fewer are permitted to touch. Scholars must request documents by precise catalog reference down to the folio. Without knowing what to ask for, one cannot enter the story. But what if somewhere within those shelves the story had already been catalogued, under a false name or no name at all? What if the Black Pope's final message was not hidden in the darkness, but buried in plain silence? In 2019, the Vatican renamed the archives. The Archivum Secretum became the Vatican Apostolic Archive, a change meant to soften mystery, to invite trust. Yet the contents remain the same. The secrets are still there. And while the title may now echo transparency, the reality remains cloaked in ritual, responsibility, and reverence. Not all secrets are dangerous. Some are too delicate for daylight. They must be kept not to conceal wrongdoing, but to protect meaning. Like a flame sheltered in a storm, or a prayer said beneath one's breath. Perhaps the final orders of the Black Pope are such a secret, not a scandal, not a prophecy, but a truth so finely crafted that the world must quiet itself before it can. Understand. As you drift into sleep, picture the dark wooden shelves of the archivum, the dust suspended like stars in still air, the wax seals untouched, the leather bindings breathing softly. And somewhere within, a sealed letter waits not for us, but for the moment history needs it most. Let your thoughts settle there, in that patient silence, where truth rests like a candle unlit, ready for the hand that knows when to strike the match. Before the title, before the seal, before the whispers in Rome's stone corridors, there was a man lying broken on a battlefield, staring at the sky. His name was Inigo Lopez de Loyola, a proud Basque nobleman turned soldier, and his leg shattered by cannon. Fire would never walk the same path again. As his body mended in a dimly lit castle chamber, his soul was quietly unraveling. He asked for tales of knights and courtly adventure to pass the days, but received instead a battered volume of the Vita Christi, the life of Christ. And something happened. In the silence of convalescence, something inside him began to stir, not unlike a flame born from coals left nearly cold. He began to pray, then to fast, then to weep. And what rose from his brokenness was not weakness, but clarity, a new kind of knighthood. Ignatius of Loyola did not seek sainthood. He sought alignment, his will with God's, his action with eternal intention. He traveled across Europe not to be seen, but to be formed, studying theology in Paris, living among the poor, sleeping in caves, writing his spiritual exercises with the same intensity once reserved for battle plans. These exercises, meditations, prayers, imaginative disciplines became the spine of the Jesuit way. They were not instructions, but invitations to reflect, to confront the self, to die inwardly so something greater might live. Through these pages, A man might come to see his own ego as illusion, his ambitions as clay, and his life as a tool to be sharpened and surrendered for divine use. In 1540, the Society of Jesus was born, but Ignatius did not build an army of passive priests. He built a brotherhood of consecrated, strategist men who could enter any nation, sit with any king, learn any language, yet remain bound by one root word. Obedience. Jesuit obedience is unlike any other. It is not blind, it is burned in, trained through silence, suffering, and spiritual refinement. The fourth vow, special obedience to the Pope regarding mission, sets them apart from all other orders, and the man who guides this order, the Superior General, inherits not a throne, but a crucible. Adolfo Nicholas carried this legacy not on his shoulders, but in his soul. His final orders, however hidden, could not be understood without first passing through the story of Ignatius, for they are not merely instructions. They are the flowering of a philosophy, planted in a war-torn soldier's heart nearly 500 years ago. Some say Ignatius saw visions. Some say he wrestled demons in silence. But what he gave the world was something sturdier than mysticism, a method, a way to see clearly, choose wisely, and act selflessly within a world steeped in noise and confusion. It is that method, the way of seeing, the discernment of spirits, that still guides the Black Pope today. So sleep now, dear listener, with the echo of Ignatius at your side. Let his prayers be your lullabies. Let his silence teach your breath to slow. And if you dream, may it be not of conquest, but of surrender, the kind that reshapes the world from within. In every great institution, power is both visible and veiled. In monarchies it may lie in the royal decree or the advisor's hand. In states it may pulse through legislation or lobby. And in the Vatican it dances between two robes, one white, radiant before the world, and one black, silent behind the scenes. They call them the White Pope and the Black Pope. One speaks in homilies heard across oceans. The other listens in silence, guiding the Church's heartbeat from beneath. This is not myth alone. This is a structure deliberate, complex, and centuries old. The papacy commands with pastoral authority, but the Jesuits shape the world through discipline, thought, and movement. Where the Pope addresses nations, the Jesuit General whispers to missions, influencing the education of princes, the spiritual formation of scientists, the ethical debates in corners far from Rome. These are not competing thrones. They are twin currents, one for the soul, one for the structure of salvation. But even currents can collide. Throughout history, the papacy and the Jesuits have experienced moments of tension. The order's influence has often sparked unease, its loyalty to the Pope paradoxically paired with a fierce inner autonomy. Jesuits have advised popes and defied them. They have defended church orthodoxy and critiqued it. When conscience called in the 18th century, their global power so alarmed Europe's monarchies that they were expelled, suppressed, dissolved. And the Pope, caught between pressure and loyalty, signed their suppression into law. It would take over 40 years for the Society of Jesus to rise again. It did not return diminished. It returned tempered. And so the shadow remained above, behind, beside the throne, not dark in spirit, but in placement, unlit by public gaze, unseen by the crowds in St. Peter's Square, yet still their guiding Pope. Francis himself is a Jesuit, the first of his kind, and yet upon ascending to the papacy, he ceased to belong to the society in the traditional sense. He became the Pope, not a Jesuit, but the Church Universal. Still, his thinking carries the fingerprints of Jesuit formation. Simplicity, spiritual depth, a discomfort with grandeur, a strategic mind wrapped in pastoral warmth. His very papacy might be the ultimate illustration of how the Black Pope's influence becomes indistinguishable from the white. And yet, the Superior General does not fade. He advises discreetly. He meets with the Pope often. He directs the largest and most educated religious order in the Church. Thousands of men, spread across the world, trained not only in Scripture, but in law, medicine, astronomy, diplomacy, literature, artificial intelligence. If the Pope dreams, in doctrine the Jesuit General dreams in deployment. This balance is delicate. Two shepherds with different flocks, yet one faith. The myth of the Black Pope as ruler behind the throne is largely fiction. But like all myths, it gestures toward a deeper truth, that some powers, though not supreme, are fundamental, and that influence, especially when quiet, can shape more than command. Adolfo Nicholas never challenged the Pope's authority, but he shaped the currents beneath it. His decisions touched Jesuit universities, missions in volatile regions, dialogues between science and faith, and when he resigned, he left behind not just a letter, but a legacy of balance, restraint, and sacred. Influence. Sleep now, wrapped in the stillness of this mystery. Know that not all authority wears a crown, and that the wisest leaders walk softly, even when they stand in the shadow of a throne. From their founding, the Society of Jesus was unlike any other religious order. Ignatius Loyola envisioned not cloisters and isolation, but engagement. Jesuits were to be contemplatives in action, men sent into the world, armed with education and diplomacy. Their mission was not only spiritual, but deeply political, to influence through intellect, conversation, and presence. Across centuries, Jesuits became trusted advisors to monarchs, princes, and diplomats. In the courts of Europe, they taught heirs to thrones, imparting not only theology, but also ethics, philosophy, and science. They planted seeds of faith and reason in the fertile minds of future leaders, shaping the course of nations without drawing swords or declaring war. Jesuit missions traveled further still, to Asia, the Americas, Africa, where they learned languages, customs, and worldviews, seeking to understand before seeking to convert. Their subtle influence extended beyond conversion into the shaping of education systems, political alliances, and cultural exchanges. Their successes bred suspicion. European courts eyed their growing influence with wary eyes. Rival factions whispered of conspiracies and secret plans, fueling legends of Jesuit plots and shadow governments. Yet these stories often obscured a simpler truth. Jesuits wielded influence by listening more than speaking, by patience more than force. In Rome, the society was both a resource and a challenge to the papacy. Jesuits acted as intellectual vanguards, debating, advising, negotiating. The Superior General, the so-called Black Pope, was at the center of this delicate web, a figure entrusted with guiding the order's far-reaching tentacles of influence. Throughout history, the Jesuits' diplomatic approach was one of adaptation. In China, Matteo Ricci embraced local customs, dressing as a Confucian scholar, gaining access to imperial circles, and introducing Western science. In Japan, they navigated hostile environments with caution and respect, even as Christianity was outlawed. Their ability to adapt made them effective, yet vulnerable. Suppression of the Jesuits in the 18th century was not merely a political act, but a reaction to their success, the fear that an order so deeply entwined in worldly power might one day overshadow the throne itself. Yet, even in suppression, the Jesuit spirit endured, hidden, dispersed, waiting for the moment to return. This chapter invites you to imagine those quiet moments, the careful words spoken in candlelit chambers, the notes exchanged between diplomats, the prayers whispered before delicate negotiations, power exercised not with loud decrees, but with gentle, invisible hands. As you drift to sleep, picture a tapestry, threads of gold and shadow intertwined, woven by hands unseen but deeply felt. The Jesuits' legacy is not in conquest or spectacle, but in the soft shaping of hearts and minds. Rest now in the knowledge that some of the greatest forces shaping history are not those who shout the loudest, but those who listen deeply and move with grace. Education has long been a cornerstone of the Society of Jesus. From their earliest days, Jesuits believed that to change the world, one must first engage the mind. Ignatius Loyola's spiritual exercises were designed not only as prayerful meditations, but as training in self-awareness and disciplined thought. This spirit carried forward into their teaching mission, not mere rote learning, but formation of the whole person. The first Jesuit school opened in Messina in 1548, a modest beginning that sparked a wave of educational foundations. Their approach was revolutionary in integration of classical learning, rhetoric, philosophy, and theology. They sought to cultivate not only knowledge, but eloquence, critical thinking, and moral integrity. Jesuit educators became renowned for their rigorous standards and innovative pedagogy. Jesuit schools soon spread across Europe and beyond, from Paris to Rome, from Goa to Lima. They became centers of scholarship, attracting students from all social classes, including the nobility and future rulers. In these halls, theology danced with science. Faith met reason in a delicate balance. Jesuit colleges pioneered disciplines that shaped modern education. They taught mathematics, astronomy, languages, and the arts, believing that a well-rounded mind was essential to serving both God and society. This holistic education was a quiet form of power-shaping leaders who would influence kingdoms, colonies, and cultures. Yet Jesuit education was not without controversy. Their emphasis on adaptability and engagement often put them at odds with more conservative elements. Accusations of elitism, political meddling, and intellectual arrogance surfaced. The very success of their schools made them targets for suppression and suspicion. Despite these challenges, Jesuit education endured and flourished. In the modern world, Jesuit universities remain prestigious institutions, champions of social justice, scientific inquiry, and ethical leadership. They carry forward a tradition that began with a wounded soldier, turned visionary. Imagine now the flicker of candlelight on parchment, the quiet rustle of pages in ancient libraries, the focused gaze of students tracing the footsteps of those who came before. In these moments, history is not just learned, It is lived, as you drift into sleep. Let the soft cadence of whispered lectures and the gentle turning of pages be a lullaby. Know that in the quiet pursuit of knowledge, the seeds of great change are often sown. In the twilight of his life, Adolfo Nicholas chose to go east. Not to govern, but to remember. Not to lead, but to let go. It was not a retirement filled with speeches or accolades. No fanfare accompanied him. Just a suitcase, a rosary, and a soft rhythm of goodbye. The East had shaped him. For over 3 decades, Japan had been his spiritual home. There, amid temples and cherry blossoms, he learned to speak less, to listen more, to lead through presence, rather than power. Even as superior general in Rome, he carried the calm of Kyoto and the patience of Tokyo within him. Now, in the stillness of his final months, he returned not to reclaim, but to release. In Manila, he visited the Ateneo de Manila University, where he once served, taught, and prayed. Students moved past him with quiet respect, many unaware that this gentle man had once stood as the head of the largest religious order in the Catholic world. He did not correct them. He smiled and walked on. In Tokyo, he returned to the chapel, where he first felt the call to serve beyond borders, beyond ego. He spent long hours in silent prayer, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by former students and friends who spoke not of titles, but of small kindnesses. He stayed in modest rooms, ate simple meals, and often rose before dawn to walk the gardens, where a bamboo stirred in the wind. Each step was both memory and meditation. Each visit a closing of a door without sound. There was no grand farewell, only gentle nods, shared glances, and moments where silence spoke more deeply than words ever could. In the Jesuit way, departure is not abandonment. It is transition, a letting go, so that others may take up the call. Nicholas lived this truth. He had written his final orders. Now he was walking them. Pilgrimage for him was not about distance. It was about presence, the sacred weight of simply being where one once belonged. He did not retrace steps for nostalgia. He returned to bless the silence he would soon leave behind. Those who walked with him during those final months describe a serenity, as if he had already crossed some threshold invisible to others. There was light in his eyes, but it no longer reached outward. It turned inward, not in isolation, but in preparation. Not long after his return to Tokyo, his health declined quietly, and, just as gently as he had lived, he passed away, a soul returning to the silence that had called him from the beginning. No great monument marks his grave. But his pilgrimage was not one that sought memorial. It was a final act of faith. A farewell written not in ink, but in footsteps and folded hands. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the sound of soft sandals on a temple path, the hush of early morning bells, the calm presence of a man walking his final road without fear. Let that stillness guide you to rest, where endings are not ends, but gentle beginnings we do not yet see. Long before the invention of satellite surveillance, before cables carried secrets across oceans, the world's most extensive network of global intelligence was built not by kings or armies, but by missionaries. Jesuits. Their vows were not to kings, but to Christ and the Pope. Yet they moved across the world with a clarity of mission and a skill for listening that rivaled any diplomat. They did not carry weapons. They carried books. And yet what they learned shaped empires. From the 16th century onward, Jesuit missionaries found themselves stationed in some of the most remote, volatile, and powerful places on earth. The Mughal courts of India, the forbidden city of Beijing, the jungles of South America, the royal salons of France and Spain. Wherever they went, they observed, documented, and quietly reported the information they gathered on politics, languages, customs, conflicts, and climate was not extracted, but earned through patience, respect, and cultural immersion. Their reports to Rome were detailed, precise, and methodical. Descriptions of rituals, military movements, scientific phenomena. Letters filled with geography, trade routes, rumors of war, and the mood of the people. These were not spies in the modern sense. They were servants of understanding, but their knowledge was powerful. The Vatican, through the Jesuits, became a silent hub of global awareness. While monarchs squabbled and generals marched, Jesuits were already 10 steps ahead, not in conquest, but in comprehension. To the outside world, the Jesuits were scholars and teachers, but to those within the Church, they were also the eyes and ears of the world. Superior generals like Adolfo Nicolas inherited this quiet infrastructure. Each missionary, each Jesuit university, each papal advisory post was a thread in the same web. His reach extended from Rome to Rwanda, from Boston to Beijing. A whisper in Tokyo could reach the Vatican by week's end, encoded in a prayerful letter. This flow of information was not for gossip or manipulation. It was used to shape policy, navigate crises, and anticipate shifts in political and spiritual landscapes. Jesuits advised popes on how to speak to rulers. They shaped Vatican diplomacy with foresight gained in quiet chapels and crowded streets. But with such reach came suspicion. In Protestant Europe, the term Jesuit became synonymous with conspiracy. Accusations abounded that they manipulated kings, controlled courts, and plotted in secret. Much of it was myth, but like all myths, it began with truth and then was colored by fear. Their loyalty to the Pope, paired with their strategic brilliance, made them appear to be an order apart, a church within the church. And perhaps, in some ways, they were. Today, Jesuit institutions continue this legacy, not as spies, but as observers, educators, ethicists. They gather knowledge still on climate science, artificial intelligence, economics, migration. They serve in think tanks, diplomatic roles, and Vatican commissions. The flow of insight continues. Only the ink has changed. As you lie in the quiet of night. Consider this, that the greatest intelligence often arrives not through force, but through listening, that secrets surrendered in confession or offered in trust to a quiet teacher can ripple further than any army's march, and that somewhere a letter written in longhand by candlelight may have shifted the course of history. Sleep well, in the comfort of knowing that not all spies wear masks, some wear collars, and not all networks are built for power, some are built for truth. Somewhere in the 12th century, an Irish archbishop named Malachi MacHale was said to have fallen into a divine trance. What emerged from his vision was not a sermon, but a cryptic, poetic sequence of mottos, each one corresponding, so the legend claims, to a future pope. 112 lines. No names, just short, enigmatic phrases. From ex Castro Tiberis, from the castle of the Tiber, to Pastor Angelicus, angelic shepherd, Each motto, in hindsight, seemed to echo something real, a coat of arms, a birthplace, a spiritual mission. The list was hidden for centuries. Only in 1595 did it surface, published under the name Proficia Sancti Malachia Archiepiscopi. By then, it was already a curiosity, a puzzle for scholars, skeptics, and the superstitious. But what gave it staying power was its uncanny precision. How some of the later descriptions seemed to match actual popes with haunting closeness. And the final line? In persecution extrema sre sedebit Petrus Romanus. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will reign Peter. The Roman. After this figure, the text ends abruptly. No 113th line. Only silence. Many dismiss the prophecy as a medieval forgery, a clever, post facto invention designed to impress or manipulate. But others point out that the early mottos are vague, while the latter ones become strangely specific. Theories abound that Malachi truly had a vision, that the Vatican covered up or edited the list, that a forgotten truth was buried in the lines between ... and then came 2013. Pope Benedict XVI resigned. Extremely rare move, and his successor, chosen in a conclave beneath Michelangelo's ceiling, was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a Jesuit. From Rome. His name? Francis, after a saint of simplicity, but his roots? Deep in the Jesuit discipline. His mission? One of reform in a church already under pressure. Some looked at this and saw only coincidence. Others saw prophecy fulfilled. For Francis is the 112th Pope in the Malachi list. And while he did not take the name Peter, his background, his order, his birthplace, his election in a time of scandal and internal reckoning, felt like a shadow cast from the old pages of prophecy. And what of the Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas? Also a Jesuit, was still alive during Francis's election. Two Jesuits, white and black, sitting at the helm of the church for the first time in history. It had never happened before. It may never happen again. Some whispered that Nicholas's final orders, still hidden, might contain references to the prophecy, a warning, a preparation, or perhaps a plan to steer the church through whatever Malachi foresaw. We do not know. We may never know. The letter remains sealed, and prophecy, like poetry, rarely shouts. It speaks in symbols, in gestures, in silence. Whether you believe the prophecy or not, it carries a dream older than doctrine, that history follows a thread, and someone, somewhere, once saw it all unfold. As you drift into rest, imagine a candlelit chamber, a monk bent over parchment, his eyes seeing more than ink, his soul trembling with something he could not name. He writes a final line, and then he stops. The page ends. And so might the world. Or perhaps only an age. Sleep softly now, beneath the stars that once watched over Malachi's dream. What comes next is always mystery. And mystery, too, is holy. At the edge of Rome, nestled among the hills of Castel Gandolfo, the Vatican's summer residence rises into the sky. But hidden beyond its gardens and galleries is a place few pilgrims ever see, a dome white and round, slowly opening like a sacred eye, within it a telescope, and around it silence. Here Jesuit astronomers gather, not to divine omens, but to study light that left its stars long before cathedrals were built. They map galaxies, track asteroids, watch the curve of comets as they vanish into black. Their work is not medieval alchemy, but precise mathematical, peer-reviewed science. And yet there is wonder in every calculation. The Vatican Observatory is one of the oldest astronomical institutions in the world, its roots reaching back to the Gregorian calendar reform of the 16th century, when Jesuits helped adjust Earth's orbit in the minds of men by measuring the heavens with clarity and care. Since then, they've followed the stars, not because they feared them, but because they knew their Creator. It is a quiet resistance to the myth that faith and science must be at odds. The Jesuits never feared knowledge. They feared ignorance clothed as certainty. To them, the universe is scripture in another form, written not in ink, but in gravity, energy, and light. Brother Guy Consolmagno, one of today's leading Vatican astronomers, once said, "We do science because we are human, and we are human because God made us curious." He holds a doctorate from MIT, has named asteroids, studied meteorites, and leads the Vatican Observatory not with dogma, but delight. Jesuit astronomy is not a contradiction. It is a continuation. The same eyes that read the book of Genesis can read the movement of moons, and when they do, they see harmony, not heresy. Adolfo Nicolas understood this. He encouraged intellectual openness within the order, not to challenge the Church's foundations, but to deepen them. He believed the cosmos pointed toward something more, not less than mystery. Some say he visited Castel Gandolfo often in his final years, not to speak, but to look. Upward. Did his final orders mention the stars? We cannot know, but we do know that Jesuits see time differently, not only in centuries, but in light years. Their mission has always spanned worlds, the human, the divine, and everything in between. In their observatories, nothing is hurried. They watch Saturn rise over the edge of dusk, measure the cooling remnants of ancient stars, and still make time for evening prayer. It is not a paradox. It is a poetry of purpose, perhaps the same silence that filled Nicholas's final letter can be found in the dark between galaxies, not empty, but echoing with the voice of creation. Sleep now under the same sky that Galileo once charted, and Jesuits now tend like sacred flame. Let your thoughts drift past the clouds. Through constellations and quiet motion, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the stars keep their secrets gently until we are ready to listen. Beneath marble floors and gilded ceilings, beyond the echoes of prayer and ceremony, a labyrinth waits. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, once called the Secret Archive, is not a place of gossip or scandal, but a sanctuary of history where time folds quietly into itself. Rows of shelves, stretching beyond sight, hold centuries of human experience. Letters penned in trembling script, ledgers of vanished kingdoms, and whispers of decisions that shaped the Church and the world. Every document is a breath of the past, soft as candlelight, yet heavy as a vow. Jesuits have long served as archivists, keepers of this delicate memory. They catalog not only official decrees, but the hidden letters of black-robed priests, the correspondence of popes, and the faint traces of lives lived in service and silence. Among these relics, some believe, rest the final orders of Adolfo Nicolas. Wrapped in code, or perhaps folded in simple humility, these papers are shrouded in layers of protection, not only by lock and key, but by the weight of faith and discretion. The archivists do not rush. They understand that some truths reveal themselves only in time. Each page they touch is a conversation between past and present, between the known and the unknowable dot in this quiet. The mystery deepens. What words did Nicholas choose? What guidance did he leave behind for the Church, for the Jesuits, for the world? No one outside the inner circle can say, the archive is more than a vault. It is a mirror, reflecting the ongoing story of belief and doubt, power and surrender. Reminder that history is not only what is recorded, but what is preserved in silence. And as you listen now, imagine the soft rustle of ancient pages, the flicker of oil lamps, and the careful hands tracing the edges of a letter written by a man whose life was itself a prayer. Sleep with the knowledge that some secrets wait patiently, that in the hushed corridors beneath the Vatican, the past holds its breath, and the future listens. In the heart of the Vatican, where corridors curve like the arc of a whispered prayer, there exists a council that few outsiders have ever glimpsed. Not the College of Cardinals, nor the public congregations of bishops, but a more elusive assembly, a circle of trusted advisers and spiritual stewards, sometimes called the Silent Council. They gather in rooms adorned with frescoes, but the walls absorb their voices, holding their words close like sacred relics. Their meetings are marked by reverence, by the slow cadence of thought, and the unspoken weight of responsibility. The Silent Council is a place of both power and vulnerability. Its members carry the burdens of centuries, decisions that affect not just doctrine, but the lives of millions. Yet their strength lies not in command, but in listening. Adolfo Nicholas was known to value such councils. He believed that leadership was not about domination, but about discernment. The final orders he left may well have been crafted for this very group, to guide them in uncertain times, to remind them of humility amid influence. This council does not seek headlines. It works in shadow and silence, trusting that the Church's true strength is found in faith lived quietly, and in wisdom shared with care. The men and women who comprise it come from diverse backgrounds: theologians, Jesuits, diplomats, scholars. Each brings a unique voice, but all speak with the same gentle conviction, to serve a higher purpose. In their deliberations, they balance tradition and change, hope and caution, the sacred and the temporal. They wrestle with mysteries ancient and new, questions of faith, morality, and the path forward. Their discussions unfold slowly, like a prayer whispered over candlelight, each word weighed and measured, each silence a space for reflection. In the end, the Silent Council embodies the paradox of power in the Church, a power that flows not from loud proclamations, but from quiet obedience to conscience. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine this council gathering in stillness, their voices, low as a breeze through ancient olive trees, their hearts united in the sacred task of stewardship. Rest knowing that even in silence, the Church moves forward, guided by those who listen first and speak last. Within the Vatican's time-worn stones, the call for reform is neither loud nor sudden. It flows like a gentle river beneath the surface, shaping the contours of the Church with patience and care. Throughout history, the Catholic Church has faced many crossroads, moments when tradition seemed at odds with the needs of the present. Each time reformers arose not to discard the past, but to deepen its meaning. Adolfo Nicholas, the Black Pope, was among those who quietly urged renewal. His vision was not for dramatic revolutions, but for a faithful reawakening, a recommitment to the core mission of service, humility, and truth. Jesuit spirituality, with its emphasis on discernment and reflection, informed his approach. Reform was a process of listening deeply to God, to the world, to the faithful. It was never a race, but a slow, prayerful unfolding. This chapter explores how the seeds of reform are planted in small acts, a decision to embrace dialogue, a commitment to transparency, a renewed focus on social justice. These changes ripple outward, transforming the Church's presence in a changing world. Yet reform is met with resistance, for the Church is a guardian of tradition, and tradition carries the weight of centuries. Balancing innovation and continuity requires wisdom, patience, and above all, trust. The Black Pope's final orders may well have spoken to this delicate dance, a reminder that true reform is born from faith, and that change, like grace, often arrives quietly. As you rest tonight, imagine the dawn's slow light, touching ancient stones and new leaves alike. Reform is like this light, not a storm, but a promise, a gentle unfolding toward hope. Sleep peacefully in this hope, knowing that even in quiet moments, the Church is being renewed, step by patient step. In a small, dimly lit chamber, a letter rests beneath layers of careful sealing, its edges worn but unbroken, its paper infused with the scent of aged ink and quiet prayer. This is the final message of Adolfo Nicholas, the Black Pope's last testament. For years, rumors have whispered through the Vatican halls of a document holding guidance, warnings, and hope. Yet those words remain unseen by all but a chosen few. The letter embodies a paradox, a powerful voice wrapped in silence. It reminds us that not all answers come swiftly, and not all truths are spoken aloud. What might the letter say? Perhaps it speaks of faith tested by doubt, of love strengthened by sacrifice, of a Church called to humility and courage. Or maybe it holds no grand revelations, but simply a call to continue, to walk forward gently, trusting the path even when it fades into shadow. Silence itself can be a message, a space for reflection, a sanctuary for the soul. The Black Pope's final orders, sealed away, invite us into this sacred silence. As you drift into sleep, imagine the letter's quiet presence, a whispered prayer folded into time, a benediction carried softly across the years. Rest in the mystery, knowing that some secrets hold their power not in revelation, but in the calm assurance of faith. May your dreams be gentle, and your heart at peace with the silent stories that shape us all. The walls of the Vatican seem to breathe with memory. Ancient stones remember footsteps long gone, and shadows remember voices no longer heard. But sometimes the faintest echo remains, a breath of presence, a thread of legacy woven quietly through time. Adolfo Nicholas departed the world with dignity and hope, leaving behind a silence that hums with possibility. His final orders may rest sealed, but their spirit lives on in those who walk the halls he knew so well, in the Jesuit companions who carry forward his vision. His influence is not measured in documents alone, but in the lives touched by his humility, in the courage sparked by his example, and in the gentle persistence of faith that refuses to waver. Faith itself is a bridge across the veil, connecting what we see with what we trust, Linking the known with the unknown dot in this space, mystery is not absence, but presence, a sacred invitation to wonder. Through years of prayer and quiet leadership, Nicholas taught that the church is not a fortress, but a garden meant to grow, to change, to bloom in unexpected ways. His orders, his teachings, and his life echo softly, like a hymn sung in a chapel. At dusk dot, and as the church moved forward, it carries these echoes in its heart. They remind us that history is not only what we inherit, but what we choose to nurture. Now, as night deepens and your breathing slows, listen for these echoes in the stillness, the gentle call of faith stretching beyond time, the quiet whisper of hope carried on the wind. Sleep within this calm, cradled by the tender mystery of the unknown. For in the end, all great stories, including those yet unread, are woven from threads of silence and light. In the quiet corners of the Vatican, where marble meets shadow, there beats a steady rhythm, soft, persistent, alive. It is the heartbeat of the Society of Jesus, a pulse shaped by centuries of faith and inquiry, of prayer and action, of mind and soul intertwined. Founded in the 16th century by Ignatius of Loyola, the Jesuits have long been both scholars and servants, seekers and shepherds, known for their commitment to education, justice, and humility. Their strength lies not in pomp, but in a restless spirit, a devotion to seeking truth, wherever it may lead. Adolfo Nicolas carried this spirit deep within him. His leadership was not about asserting power, but about nurturing this inner heartbeat, reminding Jesuits and the wider church alike that faith must be lived, not only preached. The Jesuit heartbeat moves through classrooms and chapels, through distant missions and crowded cities, through scientific observatories and silent archives. It is a rhythm that welcomes doubt as a companion to belief, that embraces complexity and values service above status. In Nicholas's final years, this heartbeat pulsed steadily, a call to remain open, to keep walking the path of discernment and compassion even when the road is uncertain. This rhythm continues now in the lives of those who carry forward his vision, those who listen carefully to the world's needs, and respond with gentle courage. As you listen now, breathe in this steady pulse, feel it resonate in your own heart, a quiet reminder that faith is not a destination, but a journey marked by love, humility, and hope. Let this heartbeat lull you into peace and carry you softly toward your dreams. The sun dips low behind the Vatican's ancient stones, casting long shadows that stretch like whispered prayers. Night gathers gently, wrapping the city and the secrets it holds in. Soft cloak of stillness. In this sacred twilight, time feels different. Moments stretch like ribbons of light, folding past and present into a quiet embrace. The Black Pope's final orders sealed away, spoken softly or never spoken at all, join this timeless dance. They become part of the veil that separates what is seen from what is felt, what is known from what is believed. This veil is not a barrier, but a threshold, a place where faith blooms quietly, where mysteries invite us to rest and wonder, where silence speaks louder than words. In the ebbing light, we sense the weight of history, centuries of prayers, decisions, and hopes woven into the fabric of the church, but we also feel the lightness of grace, an unending gift that flows beyond time. Endings here are not final. They are beginnings folded softly within the folds of night. The church, the Jesuits, the legacy of Adolfo Nicholas, all continue in ways seen and unseen. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine the veil of eternity settling softly around you, a gentle hush that quiets doubt and fear. Here, in this sacred space, rest becomes a prayer, and sleep a quiet blessing. Let the night cradle you tenderly, and may your dreams be filled with peace and the gentle unfolding of all that is yet to come. Legacy is a soft light, not always visible, but always present. It lingers in the spaces between words, in the pauses of conversation, in the silent moments that shape our days. Adolfo Nicholas's final orders, sealed and secret, are part of this subtle legacy. They are not only instructions, but invitations to live faith with courage and humility, to listen with open hearts, to walk gently with the world's joys and sorrows. The true measure of legacy is not in what is recorded, but in what is carried forward, in the quiet acts of kindness, in the steady commitment to truth, in the courage to face uncertainty with grace. The Jesuit heartbeat continues, resonating softly through classrooms, chapels, and missions. It is a rhythm shaped by centuries of service and by leaders like Nicholas, who understood that power belongs to those who serve. This quiet legacy invites each of us to consider, how do our own lives echo beyond the moment? What gentle ripples do we leave in the waters of time? As night deepens, rest in the knowledge that legacies like Nicholas's are not finished stories, but ongoing journeys carried in the hearts of those who believe, who hope, and who serve. May this thought cradle you as you drift to sleep, a soft benediction carried on the wings of quiet grace. There is a silence that does not end. It does not vanish with the turning of a page, nor fade with the extinguishing of a flame. It lives, it breathes within the quiet halls of memory, in the rustle of robes behind closed doors, in the spaces between words we long to understand. The letter remains, sealed, untouched, unrushed. Adolfo Nicholas, the man who carried so many truths across oceans of culture and spirit, left behind something more than a document. He left behind a moment, a final breath, folded into paper. We may never know what it says, and perhaps we are not meant to, for the greatest truths are often not revealed, but remembered, not spoken but felt throughout this long night's journey, through chapters of history, of whispers, of stars and shadows. We have walked not toward an answer, but toward a reverence, toward a stillness that holds more than knowledge ever could. What remains is not uncertainty, but wonder, not absence, but presence. The Black Pope's legacy is not a secret to be unlocked, but a seed planted deep in the soil of faith, waiting to bloom in unseen ways. In the archives, in the hearts of Jesuits who continue their quiet missions, in the longing gaze of those who still look up at the stars, his voice echoes, not loudly, not with thunder, but like the wind that stirs the olive branches outside a chapel door, gentle, persistent, eternal. There is a kind of holiness in not knowing, a grace in mystery, a peace in surrendering the need to see the whole path ahead. And so we end as we began, with the candle's soft flicker, with the hush of a pen's final mark, and with the silence that follows, not empty, but full of everything we cannot yet name. As you prepare to sleep, let this final thought settle over you, that there are mysteries meant not to be solved, but held. And in holding them, we do not fall into darkness, but rise gently into the light of trust that this silence remains. But it is no longer alone. You carry it now, too, in your breath and your dreams and your hope. And perhaps that was the final order all along.